Welcome to part 2 of the stages of emotional incest. Today, the symptom phase. Hang on. Just to recap, this is a 3-part series about the stages of emotional incest. In the first video, I covered stage 1, the glory phase. In today's video, it's the symptom phase. And by the way, these are not definite phases, so to speak. They may interplay with each other, blend into each other in different ways. Kids who grew up this way, of course, are going to have their own unique experiences, but I'm covering the generalities, the basics, about typically what happens to a kid who's emotionally smothered. They're a victim of emotional incest. In the glory phase, you're too young to really know what's going on. It's happening. It can feel pretty good because you're put on a pedestal quite often. But as we hit puberty and adolescence and get a bit older, definitely into our teenage years, that's when we can hit the symptom phase. That's because we're chronologically old enough and hopefully have a bit of an identity. Hopefully it hasn't all been smothered away by the perpetrating parent to where you're trying to decipher what you're all about. Who am I? Aside from being the puppet of my mother or the puppet of my father, who am I? Kids don't know the answer to this because their identity has been stripped away. So things start getting real confusing. They perhaps have their own friend group in high school now. Maybe they're starting to date. They're finding their own interests, not just what the parent wanted for them, but maybe they're in sports at school, picking out some activities or clubs or groups that they like. So they're trying to separate in a healthy way, but they can't name what's going on. They still don't really know what's happened to them. So they're going to probably have some symptoms. These symptoms, ironically, will be a catapult later in life that forces them, hopefully, into therapy to deal with the issue, to process their feelings, begin to understand everything more deeply. But for now, they're in the symptom phase. It's like they're scrambling. Everything feels a bit chaotic. They know something's wrong, but they can't pinpoint it. After all, everything looks okay on the outside to others looking in. So now they're aware of fear. Why do I have fear? Why don't I feel like I'm whole, like I have a solid identity? And they're feeling burdened now by their problems. They're a teenager. And there's a heaviness, there's an anxiety now. What's the anxiety about? I don't know. That's what's so confusing about this. With physical abuse, for example, you can point to something. You can point to the black and blue marks on your arm or on your body and say, here, this is what's wrong. Perhaps you go to a medical doctor or a teacher or another family member and look, I have a problem here. Or with sexual abuse, same thing. There's things to point to. You have evidence, even to the point of, let's say, a girl getting pregnant by her father. But with emotional incest, it's very insidious, not too much to point to. Everything looks loving. It's done under the guise of love. In this phase, you're aware that you can't be yourself. Somehow it's not welcome at home. You can tell it even more so than you could when you were a little kid. You have this great mask, a facade on all the time. You're in performance mode because that's how you were trained as a child. But the acting is getting tiresome. And you're aware that you're acting, but you don't know why you're acting. And maybe you don't have anybody to safely talk with about this. And what does dating mean? I have a crush on somebody I want to date. I've been on a couple dates, but it's awkward. I don't understand myself. And if it's a daughter taken over by her father, why does my dad seem to be angry when I go out on a date with a boy? Or the son getting that treatment from his mother. They don't want the kid out of their clutches. They're supposed to be theirs. They own them in a way. They're supposed to be there for the parent, to capitulate and listen to the parent's problems and so on. Be the mini spouse. How dare they go out and start a life? How dare they begin dating? So parents may have a difficult time with this, and the child can feel that energy. Or on the flip side, the parent may act like everything's okay. Go out and date. I'm happy for you. I can't wait to meet your boyfriend or girlfriend, especially if you start getting serious with somebody. But oh, when they meet them, they may be very judgmental and they may battle that boyfriend or girlfriend for its competition at this point. And the child is caught in the middle of it, as well as the boyfriend or girlfriend, because they're not sure what's going on with the parent and they want to be loyal to the boyfriend or girlfriend. But mother or father is saying, no, you can't go out on Friday night. Or can't you find anyone better than him or her? Don't you have better taste? Even though the him or her is really quite okay. But of course, the parent wants to put a negative judgment onto the boyfriend or girlfriend. Or maybe they're being nice to the boyfriend or girlfriend, but they're being extra passive aggressive with you, playing more the martyr. They need you. Maybe they're having more health issues now. which of course are somatic, but they need to invent something perhaps to keep you in their lair. Another symptom may be at school or even in social situations. You notice you don't like being in the spotlight and you don't know what that's about. Well, that's because you couldn't be in the spotlight growing up. You had to be the wallflower, the chameleon. You had to give all power, so to speak, to the narcissistic parent, because usually these parents are narcissists. But either which way, you weren't allowed to shine. So now there's times in school or in social settings where you have to shine. You want to shine, but you don't know how to shine. And you're awkward. And oh my gosh, I have to give a speech at school. I don't want to get up in front of people, but you have to do the speech to complete the course. So this is terrifying. I'm going to be up in front of everybody. I guess I have to share an opinion. I guess I have to be myself. Well, I don't know who myself is. And another symptom is you may start wondering, why am I so close to this one parent? A daughter who's been taken over by her father may wonder, you know, my mom seems okay. She seems like a nice person. I just never have really developed a relationship with her. That may be because the father has so smothered you that the mother was pushed away. But now you're wondering what's going on with that. And similar dynamic, if a son was taken over by the mother, what's my dad like? Why does everything seem so triangulated in our family? So triangulation is another symptom that may appear. And then, goodness gracious, there's the siblings, because now the siblings are old enough to figure out what's up with my brother or my sister getting all this special attention. I can see my mother always talking to my brother. I can see my father always sharing more intimate things with my sister. What's going on there? They have this special relationship. They do things together that the other children aren't involved in. I feel a bit neglected. I feel a bit abandoned, as a matter of fact. So now the siblings are figuring it out, something's off, and all they want to do is attack on some level the child who's getting all the attention. So now if you're the victim of the emotional incest, you're wondering, why do my siblings seem to dislike me? Well, they're angry and they don't have the words for it and can't even understand why they're not being treated equally like their brother or their sister. And by the way, this can follow a child through their entire life and they may never have healthy, happy relationships with their siblings. You may notice you have generalized anxiety because you're always in performance mode. You're always anticipating. That's what you had to do as a kid. You had to think ahead to be there as the mini husband or the mini wife. So there's an energy behind that, right? And that can cause anxiety. You always have to be on. You just can't relax and be. And even if you're trying to be, you don't even know who you are to be. You don't know yourself, so it's very uncomfortable being alone. And that's why kids quite often grow up having a hard time being in their own skin, and that may lead then, especially in one's 20s, to ways where it's trying to be masked through drugs, alcohol, and of course, eating disorders, cutting, a variety of other addiction issues. Whatever it is, it can come out in all sorts of ways, because none of these feelings are understood and definitely have not been processed. So you have to numb that uncomfortable feeling of being in your own skin. No, I don't like it. I don't want to think about this. When you're alone with your own thoughts, it can be horrifying because that rage may percolate up that you're not supposed to feel about the perpetrating parent, right? But then you realize, I am angry. I don't know what to do with it. I certainly can't show it. And you have an icky feeling because you've been emotionally smothered. A daughter thinking, why is my dad so attentive to me? Why does he try to watch me get dressed and all that? A son getting sick of the fact that his mother always wants to bring him with her to ladies' functions. Things that are appropriate for a woman of her age, but instead of her hanging out with women, she's bringing her son. Now he gets an icky feeling because of that, and then maybe you do start dating somebody more seriously. Now you're in your 20s, you're thinking of marriage and so on. But you have intimacy issues, even sexual issues. You don't know what it's like to be vulnerable because if you were vulnerable with the perpetrating parent, you would be smothered even more. So you had to have walls up. Well, if you had to have walls up all through your childhood, you're not going to automatically know how to remove these walls and be vulnerable, risk vulnerability with somebody you're getting serious with. That's too threatening. You notice you may have trust issues with friends and your significant other, and of course your family too. How can I trust them? This is unconscious, a lot of this. I've never been able to be myself. I always had to monitor what I said. So does that mean I have to learn how to trust right now? How do I trust? I don't even know what trust is. So then you begin more self-loathing. You think, well, there must be something wrong with me. Everybody else seems to be able to trust. So that turns into a lowered self-esteem, self-criticism. I'm a mess. There must be something just horribly wrong with me. So we don't externalize it to the perpetrating parent where it belongs. We internalize it and think there's something wrong with us. And you notice even with your significant other or friends or coworkers, whatever, it's hard to share an authentic opinion. You can share an opinion sometimes, and maybe when you share an opinion, you're in fight or flight mode. And that's because you're not used to sharing opinions in a healthy way. You can share an opinion, you can listen to another person's opinions. There's a flow to it, there's a give and take. But you're not used to a give and take because you just had to be there for the perpetrating parent. That required that you zip it. You couldn't find your voice, you couldn't have a voice. And you definitely don't know how to advocate for yourself. Well, what does that mean? You see other people advocating for themselves, and you can see that they're even a bit entitled. And there is a healthy narcissism for sure, but you don't know what that's like. I don't know how to stick up for myself, and if I try to, I notice I can just blow up because I feel like I have to make my point immediately because you're not being listened to. You were not listened to during your childhood years. So you're thinking now as an adult, no one's going to hear me. There's no space or room for me. So the way to create your own space or room, or try to find your voice, of course, is to be extra dominant or talk a lot. And that's because you're feeling that inner need, like that's the only way I can get my voice in because you couldn't get your voice in growing up. You hear people talk about boundaries. Well, what's a boundary? What's a healthy boundary? You may not know what a boundary is. And if you start to get the notion of what a boundary is, you're not used to implementing it. How do I implement it? If I try to implement it, am I going to have any friends? Are they all going to be mad at me? Am I supposed to say something that protects me and I stand up for myself? Is that a normal thing? Should I do that? So these basic questions come up because of the fact that your identity was stripped away when you were a kid. You haven't worked through any of these issues. And then as the years go by, you may notice, although you're trying to repress it, maybe just all this repressed anger. The confusion now is turning into rage. How dare my parent do that? The parent just doesn't get away with this and then life goes on la-di-da. No, the feelings in you for being the one who had to tolerate this abuse, those feelings are there. You've had to deny them your whole life as a coping mechanism, but usually at some point in our life, they start coming up in ways that we don't understand, and that typically is when somebody may go in for therapeutic help. I don't know why I blow up at my coworkers. All he asked me for was to retype an order form, and I tore it up and I wadded up that paper and I threw it at him and I said, leave me alone, you keep asking me for stuff. Fight or flight response to the childhood trauma of the parent smothering them. So now in different situations in our adult life, we may be triggered in these unconscious ways that tie in all sorts of methods to the emotional smothering. And we have responses that we don't even know, where did that come from? That's why getting therapy is so helpful, because we can begin unthreading all of this and working with it. So I've covered some, but not all of all the symptoms, and I just sort of wrote things down randomly. So there's a lot more, but these are the main ones that at least that I was able to come up with in what I call the symptom years. Again, everybody may experience this a bit differently and have different degrees of how they work through the smothering or how they were even smothered by the parent. It just depends sometimes on how much you were taken over. But these symptoms are very common for a child who's been emotionally abused. In the third part of this, which is the recovery phase, we'll talk about how we deal with this, how we work through it. That'll be the third part. Stay tuned for that. Please leave me some comments below. Let me know your thoughts about this. If you were emotionally smothered, are there some symptoms you'd like to add? I'd love to hear them. Please subscribe to my mental health YouTube channel if you like these kind of videos. And until next week, this is Brad Shore signing off from Ask a Shrink.